excited to do this today, and I just share my screen, so I hope you guys can see it now. And again, I want to start with a personal story. I decided I needed to learn how to manage my time at some point during my career, like 10 years ago, when I started to notice a pattern in my days that I came to work, I had amazing things to do. I had to write that amazing paper. I had to work on my grant. I had to think about this new project we had to do and put some work behind it. And I noticed that I ended up starting to work on my email in the morning, and the mail took over. I mean, there were so many things to do that came through me, through my email, that made it impossible to accomplish anything. I just ended up 5, 6, 7 p.m. I was still there, still tending to my email. I don't know whether this is an experience you relate to, but I realized that many of us end up using our days directed by what comes through us, either by email or by interactions with colleagues or other inputs we get during the day, and we don't have instead control on how to prioritize our time. So this is why I started to learn how to manage my time. I use different sources. I'll share some of them. And I'm happy to share with you what I've learned in these few years. I've been trying to be better at managing my time. So first of all, we always say that our job is stressful, and I'll use Dogbert quite a bit in this presentation. But if we look at why our job is stressful, we can really do better. I mean, lots of our daily stress comes from uncertainty on what we are supposed to do and when. Many times we are doing something, but we have in our mind something else. We are doing task A, but we really know that perhaps we should be doing task B, and we are unhappy because we are doing task A. And here is where time management can help you to size up the time it takes for you to complete a certain project. Know the time you have in a week, month, or year that you can dedicate to your job. And particularly, don't overcommit. Plan your time based on your priorities, where your, of course, is capitalized, because it's very important. Now, a question I would like to ask all of us is, what would you do if you had an extra 10 hours per week? Would you use it for hobbies? Would you use it for your friends and family? Would you invest it to further develop your career? This is not a theoretical question, because there have been studies that have shown that proper time management gives you back 10 plus hours per week. This is what we want to do today. We want to help you to gain back this time that you are using in a different way. And I'll go back in a second to show you how you are using it now. So here is an overview of what we will review today. One is defining your own goal, setting time boundaries, saying yes or no, take all that you need to do off your mind, and rein in your email. And here are a few things that I need to say. As John was saying, this is a lecture that I give every year in our PI crash course, which is a course for skills for future and new lab leaders. So I couldn't resist to put a plug for this. It has been very helpful to many of our early career investigators, postdocs, or assistant professors. And this is one of the sessions we do there, but there are more than 10 sessions spanning negotiating, staffing, leading, mentoring, etc., ranging from strategizing to communication. And so if you want to check it out, check out the SHARP program here at Columbia. We are going to have this crash course this year on June 25th, 26th here in New York City. So the resources you may want to check out if you're interested in learning more about this, these are the two in particular I'm using today. There is a video tutorial by Dave Crenshaw, which is called Time Management Fundamentals, which is on LinkedIn Learning. It's an online course, about 8 hours of video that you can take over time, of course, and most academic institutions actually provide access to their employees for this type of classes. Particularly, most universities, I think, are signed up to LinkedIn Learning, so it's something you might want to check. There is a lot of professional development tools there. And the other is a book that is available online as a PDF for free, which is Making the Right Move. In particular, chapter 6 is about time management. So you might want to refer back to these resources that are very helpful. So the first concept I want to review is that how do you use your time? How do you want to use your time? You do want to use your time to accomplish your own goals. So you don't want always to be dragged along following someone else's goal. And of course, those are also important. You also want to be a good citizen. You want to be always to help others. But you want to do it on your own timeline, on your own terms, and set your own priorities. And to do that, you need to step back a second and think, what are the goals I want to accomplish in my job life? Those might be long-term goals. Some may be tangible, such as a faculty promotion. Some might be less tangible, such as a satisfying personal life. Then you can have intermediate term goals over 6 months, a year, like publishing a paper, writing a grant. And those are really also quite important. But then there are the short-term goals, and those are the ones that use up most of our time. There may be those that are written in your to-do list or your weekly, monthly calendar. And the examples might be preparing figure for a paper, meetings, presentations, phone calls, etc. And you need to be clear about what are your goals, and you want to make sure you know what are your long-term goals, especially, and those usually are not difficult to set. But also you want once in a while, maybe every 3 or 4 months, think about what are my intermediate term goals and write them down. What type of papers I want to publish these next 6 months? What are the grants I'm writing over the next 2 NIH cycles or so? And the things you really want to accomplish in the next 4 to 8 months, because sometimes we get dragged in different directions and we don't realize we are losing sight of what we want to do. So here we go. So the key principle I want to provide today is about multitasking. We have a culture that promotes multitasking, but instead multitasking is a myth. And please pay attention, multitasking is neither good or bad, it simply doesn't exist. Indeed, when you try to multitask, you are usually switch tasking. And I'll give you a couple of examples. You might be speaking on the phone while doing your email. So you have someone you are talking to, but you're still also doing your email. Or you are listening to a video lecture while you are editing a manuscript at the same time. So what happens in this situation? You are not multitasking, but you are switch tasking. And switch tasking is defined as attempting to do multiple attention-requiring tasks at the same time. And you should avoid this at all costs, because each switch incurs switching attention cost, which includes a loss of time, a decrease in performance, and an increase in stress level. And particularly, pay attention to the decrease in performance. Usually this means you'll do it you'll need more time than doing the 2 tasks sequentially, and you will make more errors. And this you can try yourself, try to do 2 things you like to do together, usually, and try to do them instead the next day over a different in sequence, one after the other. You will notice that it takes much less time to do it one after the other rather than trying to do it at the same time. And this where I'm going. Multitasking doesn't exist. You are always switch tasking. And anytime you switch from a task to another, there is a cost. There is a cost because you need to pay attention to where you were with the new task you are moving your attention to. So you need to remember where you were with that. So it takes time to switch to a new task, and that's a loss of time. You are more likely to make errors, and that's very important also, and it will increase your stress. And this is the principle of the most important principle of time management. Switch tasking is where your time goes lost, and we need to limit switch tasking as much as possible. Not just by not trying to do two things at the same time, but also by having slots of time dedicated to a certain task, so that we are not tempted to switch from one task to the other. So minimizing switch tasking is the most important thing I'll try to teach you today. There is a different activity that you might want to consider, which is called background tasking. And it is performing a task while something mindless or mundane occurs in the background. And examples may include reading a book on a stationary bike, watching TV while walking on a treadmill. And please pay attention here that the background task, which for instance is the stationary bike, is something you control, and is something that is not going to interrupt you. I mean, you set up the bike, you decide you are going to bike for 30 minutes. You know that you have 30 minutes to read your book, or perhaps to read a grant that you are working on. And for 30 minutes, the bike will not interrupt you, will not ask you to change your attention, to switch your attention from the grant to the bike. And that is very important because you can try to do background tasks in other ways. We all have tried. For instance, we're all involved in conference calls. I've tried many times to put the conference call in the background. It rarely works. Sometimes, many times, someone calls your name, and you realize you haven't paid attention, and that causes a switch of attention, which comes with a cost. It causes stress, of course, because you are embarrassed that you don't know what people have been talking about. It causes you to have the idea that really you have missed an important conference call in the end that involved you, and so on. So you really at that point you need to pay attention whether what you put in the background needs to be something that doesn't have to interrupt you. If it can interrupt you, that's a problem. Though, I mean, background tasking may improve productivity overall. I have colleagues who have set up stationary bikes in their offices, and they take conference calls while riding a stationary bike. I don't do that, but it's something that if you want to try, perhaps it may work. So going to the next point, it's also important to set your own boundaries. And more than that, it's important to know that your time is limited. Sometimes I feel in academia, we live under the illusion that our time is unlimited. We live like we can do everything, everything is important, and we dump everything on ourselves. That is not the case. I mean, 1 week is made only of 7 days, each of 24 hours. Most of us need to sleep. And if you feel you have no limits, you will never be able to manage your time. And you may want to set more specific boundaries, such as you may not want to work on the weekend, you might not work on the evening, or you may want to say I work on the evening only a couple of days a week, and you can set what those days are. Or you may say I work on evening and weekends only in the 2 weeks preceding a grant submission. But that is very important because if you don't set exact boundaries, you will always trespass those boundaries. You will always pick up work that you can't do during work hours. And this is very important for our next steps, and I'll show you how to organize your time over the next few slides. So the overarching strategy that I want to propose is that you want to calendar nearly all you are planning on doing. So if there are things you need to do and require substantial time, even if it's not a meeting, even if it's not a presentation, a seminar, you want to put it on your calendar. And this is very important because at some point your calendar will become busy. At some point your calendar will show you have no time anymore. And at that point you will be forced to realize that you don't have time any longer to do any additional tasks, at least in the near foreseeable future. So putting in your calendar tasks you have committed to do and you are supposed to do helps you to understand where are your time limits, helps you to understand that you already committed all the time you have in your working hours. And that is a very important task that I suggest you to do. And for instance, here you see this was a calendar day from my calendar last week. There were a few meetings that in my calendar are coded in purple. There was a seminar here that we had in our Monday seminars in our department. And then there were things I wanted to do in yellow. For instance, I wanted to work on these aims on my collaborator. I want to look at my postdoc's Allison's bio sketch. I wanted to work on certain things I had to do during my day, including preparing the slides for today's seminar. And this helps me understand that on that specific day, my day was full. I had a full day of things to do, and particularly it takes off my mind the job of thinking, what am I supposed to do? I come to work and I know immediately what I'm supposed to do. And in general, I don't want to change this. In general, I have the day like this. I want to do it. I want to go through. I change it only if there is an emergency. Things that are even urgent don't change this. Things that are a catastrophe might change this. So how do we get to do that? So what I show you here is the end point of a process. And the concept is that you want to put everything on your calendar. But how do we accomplish doing that? I want to introduce a concept that is very common in time management, which we will call processing. The idea of processing is to process items that are still unprocessed. So items that are still unprocessed include emails, um, physical mail, tasks that people might assign to do, things you're supposed to do, voicemail you receive, assignments, project reminders, etc. And unprocessed means that with any of these items up here, you have not decided yet what to do with it, when you are going to do it, and where its home is. And what I do, I set aside at least 5 hours every week for processing. And these are blocks on my calendar, as you can see here. First thing in the morning, when I come in, I do processing. And during processing, I mean, I decide what to do with all the things that are unprocessed. And most of my things obviously come from email, when I'm going to do them, and where I put them while waiting to do them. And this is very important for me and has been critical to control my productivity. So let's take a step back and think, where does unprocessed items come from? They come from gathering points. For instance, emails are a gathering point, an inbox is a gathering point. It can be people, it can be your spouse, it can be your partner, can be co-workers, can be your assistant. Those are all people that might have things that need your attention and especially things you need to do. Can be pockets in your clothing where you can stash receipts or notes, etc. Can be your computer desktop, can be the your desk area, your floor area. People also use their floors sometimes. Can be areas in your home, can be drawers, mailboxes, And very important, many of us are tempted to keep things to do in your mind. And I want to point out this is a critical point. You should not keep unprocessed items in your mind. That is really a no-no, because if you keep things that still you haven't decided when to do them and what to do with it in your mind, while you are writing your grant, you will be thinking about that unprocessed items. I don't know, someone asks you to teach a, an invited lecture, and you say, oh, I need to reply to that person. Oh, I need to think whether I do that or not. And your attention will be drawn, switched to a different task. And this, again, is against the tenets of time management, because we want to avoid switching costs. So if the things you haven't decided what to do are in your mind, there's a big problem, because you will always be drawn to change your attention from what you're supposed to do to the things that you're not supposed to do now, but you don't know when to do yet. And so there will be a lot of switching costs from switching from the task you are focusing on to the tasks that require your attention in the future. And that is really important. A great way to reduce stress and switching time is to unload your mind. Make your mind free of unprocessed items or things that require your attention in terms of decisions. And therefore, in my experience, it's very helpful for me to have that processing time, that block in the morning of 1 hour where I process my items, because that is when I decide what to do, when to do it, and where I put it, where is its place, where I put it while I'm not working on it. And this, the most important point. The second most important point is to have as few gathering points as possible. And for instance, if I were to ask you how many gathering points you have, and this again is wherever you get stuff that require things to do, whether it's paying bills or renewing a subscription or committing to a talk or thinking about a conference call, etc. If you ask you to write down one by one all the gathering points, you will probably get up to a number of between 10 and 30. So good time management practice require you to reduce that to 5 or fewer. So, for instance, in my own practice, what I've done, and this again, I started to do this a few years ago. I was completely different before. I had about 19 gathering points before that. I have 4 gathering points now. I have one inbox that combines my work and personal email. You can do that in your computer. You can combine 2 email accounts into one. And I really thought it was dumb, but honestly, it works much better because it reduces switching time. I receive a few personal emails in the morning when I come to work. I reply to them. I use some of my work time for personal stuff. But I'm not tempted to switch when I'm doing something else to see, oh, I haven't checked my Gmail account. I need to do it now. And that would be worse because it would require switching time. And instead of having one inbox helps you immensely. You might be skeptical, but I suggest you try, and you'll see whether this helps you. So this combines my work and personal. Another thing that my inbox does is that I have my work voicemail forwarded to my work email, so I don't have to check my voicemail. All of my notes, I have a system to send them all to my email. When I finish a meeting, I take a scan on my notes and I send them to my email. So I don't have to worry about my notes. Or if you use an iPad or a tablet, you can do that directly electronically, I guess. For my voicemail, I have a voicemail in my cell phone. Honestly, I don't get a lot of voicemail messages anymore this time. If I get them, probably are worth ignoring. And as I said, my work voicemail is forwarded to my email. So that's another gathering point. And then everything that is physical goes in my bag. And particularly one specific pocket in my bag. And this might be receipts from a conference, mail also from home, I put in my bag. That's okay. Business cards I receive, etc. Everything physical goes in my bag. And then in the morning when I do processing, I do my email. I usually check my voicemail honestly whenever I can, but especially I empty my bag, my pocket in my bag, and I put everything on my table, and I sort out whatever I need to do with my physical stuff. And this helped me a lot because, again, having 20 gathering points, it means that every time you bump into a gathering points, whether it's your car, whether it's your something at home, you are derailed in your plans. You're going to have a switch in time. You're going to be in switch tasking from what you're supposed to do to something that the gathering point wants you to do. So reining in your gathering points is very important. So one way I found useful to unload my mind is to have an app on my cell phone, and I'm not endorsing this specific app. This is an app that is free on Android that does one simple thing. You push an icon on your phone, and it opens up a window with an email that goes directly to you. So you don't have to type your own address. You need just to write a note, and that will be emailed directly to your email. And that's a great way to unload your mind, because something that causes switch tasking is also self-generated, are your own ideas. So the moment you might be walking, or you might be in a meeting, or you might be writing your grant, and you say, oh, I need to do this tomorrow. I need to talk with the person from a mission for our new students. So I need to have this idea about a grant. I have this idea about how to solve all the problems in the world concerning public health. So what you want to do is um, to find a way to write it down. The way I like is to send an email to myself, because so that goes directly in my inbox. So I pull up my phone, I get this specific app in particular, and I write a short email saying, Andrea, remember to do this, remember this idea. And in the morning, during processing, that idea is there. And then at that point, I'll process it. But I don't want to stop what I'm doing there just to think about it. I just want to write it down so that I don't miss it, and I'll think about it tomorrow. And of course, there are several of these Mail Myself apps for both Android and iPhone, and you can find several that are free. So feel free to pick your own. I'm not endorsing this one in particular. So now we have been talking a lot about processing. Now is the time to tackle it. What processing means getting all the unprocessed items and deciding what is the next step, when will it be done, where is its home. And again, processing is a block of time in your calendar. In my calendar is one hour. I'm tempted to say that probably I should make it 1.5 hours now, because I'm getting a lot of emails in particular that require a lot of time. But let's pay attention. This is not usual emailing, it's processing. And in particular, here it is. You get an unprocessed item, for instance, an email requesting to reviewing a paper, for instance. So when you receive this, the most important thing you want to do is asking, what is the next step? And this question needs to be answered with another question. Is this worth my time? Or you can say, is this really something I want to do? This is very important because you may want to say no, or you may want to say yes. And if it is no, you have two options. One is to decline and say, dear editor, I'm sorry, I've been very busy, or I can't do this, or this is not in my area of expertise. I would suggest to find someone in the area with the appropriate area of expertise. Or you may want to delegate, and you might want to say, okay, I can't review it, but I think one of my postdocs would be amazing at doing this, or this colleague who has this great expertise that matches this paper. At least you can think this with any type of things that come your way. Request to give an invited talk, same thing. If you cannot go, you can say, okay, I'm declining this, I cannot go. Or you can say, I'm delegating. And I want to say something that is very important. You need to learn to say no. You are not doing it well. This is something you want to put on a sticker note on your desk. None of us is saying no enough. And this also, I leave it to Dogbert to make the point here, where he says that today you will learn that rudeness and good time management are the same thing. I wouldn't say you need to be rude, but I need to say that you need to say no. People, coaches who teach time management tell us that an average professional should say yes to one opportunity and say no to 10. So we should pick up only 1 out of 10, actually 1 out of 11 of the opportunities that come our way. Then obviously it may vary depending on how busy you are, but it's important to know that you need to say no. And it's important also to say it is hard, but it's the most important step. And you need to decide based on your priorities. Do not let others decide for you. And you want to maximize return. You need to be the one who decides which projects you can and you want take on. You need to be the one to decide which projects need to be completed to near perfection also, grant application, and which do not. And this is also very important. Say no to the temptation of being always perfect. It's not just say no to a task, but sometimes things need to be done to a certain level that don't need to be done perfectly great. A way you may find easier to say no is if you can think about an alternative that doesn't involve you. Many times I find myself on the verge of saying yes to something when I realize that there is someone else who could do it much better. And the person who contacted me, let's say to go to a conference and present, perhaps doesn't need me, but needs someone with those characteristics. And if I match them up with the perfect speaker, they might be happier even than if I went myself. And that saves me time and makes them happier. So pro tip, suggest an alternative that doesn't involve you, which is akin to delegate, I would say. So we are back to our flowchart. So we explore the idea of saying no. You need to say no a lot. But then there are things that you really want to do, and then you are saying yes. For instance, you really want to review that paper because really it's in your field, it's something you're interested in, it's something that's important, and you want to be a good citizen. And you have the time, of course. And then you say yes, and when you say yes, you decide something that you don't want to decline, you don't want to delegate. And again, I want to point out before going forward that when you start from being a junior, when you move from postdoc to being an early assistant professor, you're not used to delegating usually. And you need to think how you can use your trainees, for instance, how you can use your staff. You need to think hard about what are the things you can delegate to them. Just pay attention to that. But then we are to the second step. The first question is, what is the next step? The second question is, I accepted the task, I want to do it. When will it be done? And here is a rule of thumb. If it is less than 5 minutes, it is something that it just requires quick thinking, a quick reply to an email, you want to do it now. You want to just think about what you're going to reply and reply now. And the reason is very simple. If it is so short, you don't want to plan it for the future because it will require switch tasking time. And the time it takes to plan it for the future, to put in your calendar, the time it takes to to plan it and to go back and think what it was about will take more than 5 minutes. So it will be switch tasking times will add up and will make it longer than doing now. You have read the email, you know what it is, you decide now, reply now, less than 5 minutes, done. If it is more than 15 minutes instead, you need to make sure you have time for it. And then what I do, I put them in my calendar. If it's something like reading a draft of a paper of one of my students, one of my collaborators, I put it somewhere in my calendar in the week, in the following weeks, 2 weeks from now. Usually I ask, when do you want this back? Rule of thumb, we usually are tempted to put it as early as possible. Instead, you want to put it as late as possible because you need to leave time for things that are more time sensitive. So you put in your calendar as something you need to do, and you will notice that I don't use much to-do lists or task lists. I use a lot my calendar, and this is because the calendar populates and tells me whether I have more time for additional tasks. So if it is more than 15 minutes, it goes on my calendar. If it is less than 5 minutes, I do it immediately. If it is between 5 and 15 minutes, so it's in between, but it has a deadline, I don't want to miss the deadline, it goes on my calendar anyhow. If it is less than 15 minutes and more than 5, but is more not time sensitive, I use a running list. So a running list of things that if I end up having a little bit of time in between meetings, or I end up finishing one of my tasks earlier than expected, I can go back to the task list, and these are the things I do in my free time. If you end up in a seminar that you really thought was going to be interesting, but instead you really didn't read the title well, and you end up really, it ends up really being a different thing that you thought about, it's not interesting to you, you can have a task list and you can go to that and look at that task list whenever you're available. But I have to say I use this task list not very frequently. I don't have a lot of items here because again, if your task list is very long, then you don't know when to do it. You will never be able to do it. This is the principle of putting things on your calendar rather than using a task list. Because if it is on your calendar, it will get done. If it is on your task list, it will never get done. And finally, this is probably the simplest point, where is its home? And the issue is that you have an email, you have something, I don't know, receipts, a physical item. You have put, it's not one of the things you already done, it's something that ends up here in the calendar or in the task list. You want to put the material somewhere where you can find it, so that when you go back to do the task, you want to find the materials you needed very easily. It can be a file within your calendar entry. So when you calendar things, you add the information directly in the calendar entry. It can be in your email archive. It can be your hard drive somewhere. It can be in your file cabinet. Wherever it is, you want to make sure it's in a place where you can find it easily. And very important, you don't want to keep in your memory. You don't want to keep in your mind where it is. The best thing to do is to put in your calendar exactly also all the information. Your calendar have to have the information about what is the next step, when will be done, the calendar does that itself, and where is its home. And in fact, here is the final result. I know what to do with the task, I know when to do it, I know where it is. And for instance, this is again my example of a day from last week. I needed to review some pilot proposals from Columbia University. I had one proposal to review, I think, and the when is here. What to do with the review is easy. Review the CU proposal. Where it is, I put the login to access the system, to access the proposals inside the calendar entry. So I just had to click there, and the material to do the task was there. Or in case of these aims, I had a file in the calendar entry, you can see there is an attachment here. The same with Alison's bio. I had her bio here, and I look it up. When the time came, it was already there. If it's something physical, I might write look in your file or look there. I can put here where it is so I don't forget where it is, because I don't want to spend 15 minutes trying to find out where I put the printout that the colleague gave me. I want to know where it is. It seems a lot of time to write down where it is, but if you have only 30 minutes to do a task and you spend 20 trying to figure out where you put the printout, that becomes a problem. And examples over here. And for instance, for preparing my slides from time management, I said use slides from the PI crash courses. So I just went to my folder where I keep my presentations, and I picked the slides from last year and I updated them. So this is just an example of what is the final result. And if you do this, you are on a roll. You don't have to think about anything during your day. And that is important because it reduces switching costs, it reduces anxiety, it reduces uncertainty about what you are supposed to do today. So another principle I want to give you is that important is not the same as urgent, and urgent is not the same as important. It is really critical to prioritize your tasks and decide when to say yes or no. So there are things that are urgent but not important. There are things that are not important but urgent, and you want to pay attention particularly to the things that are important and not urgent. Put them on your calendar and make sure that they don't become urgent. The worst situation is where things are urgent but not important, and unfortunately many of us get swamped with this. So try to focus on things that are not urgent but important. Finally, emailing. Your inbox is the highest challenge to your time management. I do email in my processing time, and then what I do during the day, I have 2 others email breaks. This is the way my calendar is set up. I have 15 minutes here and 15 minutes here to review my emails. During my processing time, on most days, my inbox goes down to 0. I process all of them. But then what I do here, I don't do all of my emails that have come. But what I do, I check whether there is anything that needs an action immediately, a reply immediately. I reply only to time-sensitive email, and I leave the others for tomorrow's processing time. And this is really important because otherwise, if you go back to your email here, you will not use this time anymore. The email will draw you in, and you will use all of this time to do things that your email require. Instead, here, I just do things that are, I just look at email, reply quickly to email. The dean might need something tomorrow, immediately, or a colleague has an urgent question. I reply to those type of emails. I don't do the others. So another thing that is important is that we spoke now of tasks that seem pretty discrete. I might have given you the impression that this method works only for tasks that are 1 hour, 2 hours long, half a day. What about very large tasks, like writing a paper or writing a grant application? So for instance, the way I do with grant application, I break up a grant writing in many different tasks. And for instance, in this example, there is a deadline. This was for an RFA where the deadline was on Thursday, April 12. And I know that this is when I need to submit the grant. So I decided all the steps I need to do, and I put on my calendar when I need to do them. And I block out time on that week to make it happen. I just really put physical blocks of time on my calendar so that on this week, I know that I need to write the specific aims sent to co-I's, receive co-I's comments, then write significance, approach, etc. Also note that there are things that are intellectually intensive, like writing science, and there are things that are less intellectually stimulating, like a budget justification. I usually do this in the morning, the ones that are highly intensive. The ones that are more mechanically, I do them in the afternoon, where I'm a little more tired, little less creative. And I tend to mix them up rather than having a week where I do all the administration. I do them at the same time so that I use my quality time for science, my less quality time for mechanical tasks. And of course, this also makes sure that because the administrative parts in italics usually need to be turned in earlier than the science, I make sure to put them on a timeline that is appropriate. So my final recommendations: protect your time, make appointments with yourself on your calendar, be efficient, know your biological clock. As I said, I think usually the morning is when you are more productive for big thinking and writing. Set time limits. Use scrap out times for your 15-minute task list. And also use some common sense. Sometimes instead of writing 200 emails, make a quick phone call. There are these mailing exchanges, sometimes they never end. Sometimes making a quick phone call is much more time efficient. Structure and supervise meetings so that they are short, and delegate work. So finally, I unfortunately didn't leave as much time as I hope for questions, but this is just another summary of what we said, and I think I covered all of this. And I want just to finish by saying that I would invite everyone to look up our SHARP program, of which the PI Crash Course is one of them, and we do a lot more than just that. We offer a lot of very hot topics in research, and you're all invited here in New York City. And this year we are also starting Portland, a new location to offer some of these different boot camps in the summer, including my epigenetic boot camp. And thank you so much, and happy to take questions.
Andrea, that was fantastic, and you have generated many questions from the audience. So I'll just start from the top and see how many we can fit in. So 2 people were curious about how far in advance you would recommend actually putting items on the calendar.
I mean, as far in advance as you can. I think the question is, I would turn the question around. You need to put the tasks as far as possible. We are tempted to put the tasks very early, thinking we need to do it as soon as possible. You want to put them as far as possible. So the farther they are, the better. I don't know whether that answered the question, but as long as you don't have people complaining to you because you were supposed to do that thing earlier, I think you can put them as far as you want.
Okay, that makes sense. And then how does that work though in terms of giving yourself some flexibility? Because it seems like your calendar could fill up, and then things you learn about that you need to do sooner, there's no place for them left on the calendar.
So I mean, of course, the flexibility depends on you, correct? I usually don't leave time open in my calendar, but I can move things around. If there is something more time sensitive that comes up today, and I need to have a meeting with a person, for instance, who needs my help, I can decide that something I needed to do today, I can do it tomorrow, correct? It's a little harder than to move around things, but you can really say, okay, I needed to read this paper, I'm not doing today, I'll do it in another time. What I usually do in my calendar, there was an example of a day that was already all packed, but usually that happens 1 or 2 days in advance. So usually, if I look at my, I don't know, Monday next week, my Monday next week is almost completely open. And something I started to do now is that I keep 2 days in my week free of meetings, so I can really do stuff. And this was, for instance, was a relatively free Monday. It was supposed to be free on meetings, but a few meetings ended on that Monday anyhow. But it was really the idea is that I always have a little bit of time free in my week where I can reschedule things if it needs to be.
Great, that is very helpful, I think, for folks. What about, next question. How would you recommend committing to helping someone, but you're not sure at the moment when you'll be available in the next few weeks?
That's a $1 million question. I mean, I don't know how to do, but I mean, if you need to help someone, I mean, I guess perhaps the question is, if you don't know whether you're available or not, it might be that you haven't managed your calendar in a way that is effective. Because I mean, the principle of time management is that you should know whether you're available or not. And if you're not available, unfortunately, you cannot do it. It's hard to say, but you cannot help that person. If you're available, you know it. And again, you might not be available, but you might want to take a hard look at your calendar and say, is there a way I can open up time? Do I really need to write that paper now? Perhaps I can write it next week. Perhaps that thing that I really think I need to do right now is not something I need to do right now. It's something I should have pointed out earlier, is that it's very hard to say no to others, but it's even harder to say no to yourself. Many times we need to learn how to say no to ourselves. And many times, I mean, we might really think we need to write this paper this week, but if you look carefully, it's really not true. I mean, it's really something that we self-impose on ourselves, and it's something we need to be very attentive, because many times we are doing things just out of pride or out of self-respect, let's say. But it's not something that our job really requires us to do, or just the mechanics of our work requires us to do. So it's a very important thing to prioritize based on reality rather than on feelings.
Okay, so do you keep your email closed during the day, except when you're designating the time to actually look at that email?
I do even more. I got a software that blocks my email during the day and releases new emails to my inbox only 3 times a day. So I can't even see my email even if I open my email. Sometimes as part of my tasks, I need to go back to my email to find that email message that I need to accomplish a certain task. And I noticed that when I did that and there were new emails, I got distracted and I ended up replying to people anyhow. So I just decided to use a software that, for those who are interested, is called Boomerang, that is an add-on to Outlook that blocks my email. So my mail comes in only 3 times a day when I'm scheduled to see it. Of course, you can set filters. You can let in things that are marked as urgent. There are people who mark everything as urgent, unfortunately, and that doesn't help. And or things that come from a certain person. For instance, you can say your lab manager always comes in, or your dean always comes in. And but I really do stop my email so that I'm not tempted to look at my email during the day. Plus, I don't have any alert. My email doesn't beep, doesn't say anything.
So you add all these things to your calendar, you have the set times to do them. Two related questions. What do you do if there's a great situation where you actually finish the task early? Do you move on to the next thing on the calendar? What do you do with that slot of time that you've now opened up? And then what do you do if you don't finish the task in the allotted time?
I mean, the first question is easy. You just move to the next one, and there will be always tasks. There is no worry with that. I mean, you can end the day with no problems, and the next day with processing, you think what to do. If instead you need more time, that is a problem. So at that point, you need to reschedule some of the things you have been doing. So I learned the hard way that I need to put adequate time. That I tend to think that I can wrap up things in much shorter time that the task actually needs. So it's important really to be realistic when you when you size up a task, and make sure you put adequate time, because if you put more time than you need, you are great. You just go to the next task and that's it. And you can also go to the task the next day. I mean, there is no problem with that. But if you are in the opposite situation, that creates a problem. And again, at that point, you need to just reschedule. Something though that allocating time to a task, it's also important because it forces you to use your time wisely. So you just it forces you to decide, okay, this is not just this task needs 1 hour, but also this task is worth 1 hour of my time. You can do it. You can do it at different depth, and I mean, you can read someone else's paper at a depth where you check all the figures, all the footnotes, all the formatting, like it were your own paper. Or you can do it instead by reading only the sections, by reading the paper, but paying attention particularly at the sections where you are specifically involved. And if you know you only have 1 hour, you'll probably do the latter rather than the first. So scheduling, having time for your tasks also forces you to be in on time.
Super helpful. Okay, I believe this will be the last question because we want to stay on time. So what happens if you don't hear back from your collaborators as soon as you expected? And how do you avoid having that mess up your planned sequence of events and time management?
I mean, first of all, I should have prefaced this by saying that our job and our life are messy, and there is no way to avoid being in situations that are not perfect. So I don't want to give the feeling that you can have a perfect time management and a perfect life. There will be always situations that are like this. And I mean, if people don't come back to you, you really need to push them and try to find ways to get to deliver to you what you need. But at the same time, again, you need to reschedule, change your plan. You will have to do that many times. It's not something, because you have made a plan, it doesn't mean you cannot change it.
All right, thank you, Andrea. I think we learned a lot of very helpful pointers today. One person actually said this is going to change their life on the chat. So pretty exciting to be able to do that in under 1 hour. So everyone, this will be posted on the ISEE YouTube channel in the coming days. So if your friends want to watch this or you want to rewatch and grab any citations that Andrea alluded to, this will become available. And stay tuned for our next webinar, which will take place in May with Joel Kaufman, the new editor at EHP. So he'll be talking about writing and submitting papers and hopefully a little bit about what the new directions will be at EHP. So thank you very much, Andrea, for your time. And
thank you for the invitations.
See you later.